The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a landmine. 17-year-old Mason Carter stared at it through the cracked doorframe of his foster family's farmhouse kitchen. 3 months. That's how long he'd been at the Hendersons, his 8th placement in 6 years. He'd learned not to unpack his duffel bag anymore. The return address made his stomach twist. Caldwell and Associates, estate attorneys. Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the morning silence. Mason, honey, come in here. We need to talk. His hands went cold. This is it. They're sending me back. But when he stepped into the kitchen, Mr. Henderson was holding the letter with tears in his eyes. Son, did you ever know a man named Samuel Thornton? The name hit Mason like a freight train. Samuel Thornton. The old man from the farmer's market who'd bought him lunch every Saturday for 2 years when Mason was living at the group home in town. The one who'd taught him about soil composition and heirloom seeds. The one who'd died 4 months ago, right before Mason got placed with the Hendersons. He was kind to me, Mason whispered. Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked. Mason, Samuel left you his farm. 300 acres, the house, everything. But there's a condition. She paused, her hands shaking. You have to decide within 72 hours whether to accept the inheritance, or it goes to his estranged nephew. And that nephew is already making calls to developers. Samuel spent 50 years protecting that land from being turned into strip malls. Mason's world tilted. Why me? I was just some foster kid who... Read it, Mr. Henderson said, sliding a handwritten letter across the table. Mason, if you're reading this, I've moved on to the next field. You reminded me of myself, a boy who needed roots but never had soil to plant them in. This farm has been in my family for 4 generations, but blood doesn't make family. Love does. You're the only one who ever asked me why I saved those heirloom seeds, not just how much they're worth. The choice is yours, son. But choose fast. My nephew James will bulldoze every apple tree for a parking lot if you don't. Samuel. The clock on the wall ticked. 72 hours. 3 days to decide if he'd accept a life-changing inheritance or let a man's legacy die. But there was a bigger problem. Mason was still a minor, and his caseworker had already scheduled his transfer to another home in 2 days, 6 hours before the deadline. Wait. Before we go any further, what would you do? A foster kid with no future suddenly inherits a farm worth millions, but he's got less than 3 days, and he's about to be moved to another county. Would you fight for it? Or walk away because you don't think you deserve it? Smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and comment your answer right now. Because what happens next shocked everyone in that small town, including the lawyer who tried to bury the truth about Samuel's will. Stay with me, because the real reason Samuel chose Mason will absolutely break your heart. Mason's caseworker, Janet Riley, arrived at the Henderson farm the next morning with paperwork and a tight smile. I heard about the inheritance. That's quite a surprise. I need to stay here until the deadline, Mason said, standing at the porch steps. Just 4 more days. Please. Janet sighed. Mason, your new placement is already arranged. The Franklins are expecting you Tuesday morning. I can't just. That land is going to be destroyed. Mason's voice cracked. Samuel trusted me to protect it. You're 17. You can't legally own property until you're 18, which isn't for another 7 months. Even if you accept the inheritance, you'd need a legal guardian to hold it in trust. And the Hendersons aren't your permanent placement. Mrs. Henderson stepped onto the porch. What if they were? Everyone turned. Robert and I have been talking, she continued, glancing at her husband. We'd like to start the paperwork to become Mason's legal guardians. We can petition the court for emergency status given the time-sensitive nature of the inheritance. Janet blinked. That process takes months. Or 72 hours if a judge deems it urgent, Mr. Henderson interrupted. I already called our lawyer. Mason felt his knees weaken. You'd do that? For me? Mrs. Henderson's eyes glistened. Honey, we were already planning to ask. Samuel just gave us a deadline. But there was another problem. Samuel's nephew, James Thornton, had filed a legal challenge that morning. He claimed Samuel was mentally unfit when he drafted the will, and he had a hearing scheduled for Thursday, one day after Mason's deadline. The farm's fate would be decided in a courtroom, whether Mason was ready or not. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He walked the 2 miles to Samuel's farmhouse, the place he'd inherit if the guardianship went through. The key Samuel had given him 2 years ago still hung on his keychain. He'd never had the courage to use it before. The house smelled like old wood and lavender. Photos lined the walls, black and white images of generations of Thorntons working the land. But one photo stopped Mason cold. It was Samuel as a young man, standing beside a teenage boy with dark curly hair and a crooked smile. The boy looked exactly like Mason. His hands shaking, Mason pulled the photo from the frame. On the back in Samuel's handwriting, James, age 16. Before he chose money over roots. James, Samuel's nephew. The man trying to steal the farm. Mason's mind raced. He grabbed his phone and took a picture of the photo, then kept searching. In Samuel's desk, he found a wooden box filled with letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to James over the past 30 years. Letters Samuel had written, but never sent. One letter made Mason's breath catch. James, I know you think I'm punishing you by not leaving you the farm, but I'm giving you a gift. The chance to choose differently than you did at 17. You picked your father's money over your own son when she got pregnant. You walked away from being a father because it would hurt your inheritance. I won't let you destroy this land the way you destroyed that boy's chance at having a dad. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and you're trying to take from another fatherless boy what you refused to give your own son. I pray you see the pattern. I pray you stop it. Samuel. Mason's world exploded. James Thornton had a son he'd abandoned, and Samuel was trying to break a cycle of rejection that went back decades. But there was more. Mason found a sealed envelope with his name on it, marked, "Open only if James challenges the will." Inside was a DNA test result. Mason's hands trembled as he read the document. DNA match, 99.97% probability of paternal grandfather relationship between Samuel Thornton and Mason Carter. Samuel was his grandfather, which meant James Thornton, the man trying to steal the farm, was Mason's biological father. The room spun. Mason dropped into Samuel's old chair, the letter from the envelope fluttering to the floor. He picked it up with shaking hands. Mason, if you're reading this, James has shown his true colors again. I didn't tell you the truth because I didn't want you to carry the weight of being unwanted. Your mother, James's high school girlfriend, died in childbirth. James signed away his rights before you were born because my brother, his father, threatened to disinherit him if he ruined his future with a teen pregnancy. I only found you 3 years ago when I hired a private investigator. By then you'd been in the system for years. I wanted to petition for custody, but my lawyer said at my age, 82, no judge would grant it. So I did what I could. I showed up. I bought you lunch. I taught you about the land. I gave you roots, even if I couldn't give you my name. James doesn't know you're his son. I never told him because I knew he'd use it to manipulate the courts. But if he's fighting this will, it's time he faced what he threw away. You're not just a foster kid who needed a farm, Mason. You're a Thornton. And Thorntons protect the land. The choice is still yours. You can reveal the DNA test and force James to confront what he did. Or you can let him live in ignorance. But know this. You deserve this farm not because of blood, but because you're the only one who understands what it means to be planted somewhere. Love, Grandpa. Mason's tears hit the paper, smudging the ink. His father had abandoned him before birth. His grandfather had loved him in secret for 3 years. And now he had 48 hours to decide. Reveal the truth and destroy James publicly, or let the man keep living a lie. The emergency guardianship hearing happened Wednesday morning. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, smelling like old books and anxiety. The Hendersons sat beside Mason, their lawyer presenting the case for immediate guardianship. But James Thornton's lawyer was vicious. Your Honor, this boy has been in 8 foster placements in 6 years. He has a documented history of behavioral issues, academic struggles, and attachment disorders. Samuel Thornton was a lonely, elderly man who was preyed upon by a manipulative teenager looking for a payday. Mason's jaw clenched. Mrs. Henderson grabbed his hand. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, My client has evidence that Samuel was suffering from early-stage dementia when this will was drafted. The entire document should be invalidated, and the estate should pass to Samuel's rightful heir, his nephew James Thornton. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at Mason. Son, why do you think Samuel left you his farm? Mason stood. His voice was quiet but steady. Because I asked him about the seeds. The courtroom went silent. Everyone else asked him how much the land was worth. Mason continued. How much he'd take for it. When he'd sell. But I asked him why he saved seeds from 1947. Why he composted instead of using chemicals. Why he planted apple trees he'd never see bear fruit. His voice cracked. He said it's because land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. And if we don't take care of it, we're just thieves passing through. The judge's expression softened. Mason looked directly at James Thornton for the first time. The man was in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit, his dark hair graying at the temples. He looked nothing like the teenager in the photo. He looked like a stranger. Samuel didn't leave me the farm because I'm special, Mason said. He left it to me because I was the only one who saw it the way he did. Not as property, as home. James's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a compelling story, but it doesn't change the legal facts. I have a legal fact, Mason interrupted. He pulled the DNA test from his jacket. Samuel Thornton was my biological grandfather, which makes James Thornton my biological father. The courtroom erupted. James Thornton's face went white. That's impossible. I don't have a... Ashley Morgan. Mason said quietly. My mother. You got her pregnant senior year. Your father told you to sign away your rights or lose your inheritance. So you did. She died giving birth to me, and I've been in foster care ever since. James staggered backward. His lawyer grabbed his arm. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Carter, approach the bench with that document. Mason handed the DNA test to the bailiff. The judge studied it, her eyes widening. She looked at James. Mr. Thornton, were you aware you had a biological son? James's voice was barely a whisper. No. I signed papers. I thought he'd be adopted immediately. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Mason said, his voice hard. Samuel tried to tell you for years. He sent you letters. But you never read them because you only cared about the farm's value, not its legacy. Tears streamed down James's face. I was 17. My father said I'd ruin my life. So you ruined mine instead. The silence was deafening. The judge set the document down. Mr. Thornton, do you wish to contest your son's inheritance in light of this evidence? James looked at Mason, really looked at him, for the first time. Mason saw his own eyes staring back. His own crooked smile. The same dark curls Samuel had captured in that photo 40 years ago. No, Your Honor, James whispered. I don't. His lawyer grabbed his arm. James, you'll lose everything. I already did, James said. 17 years ago. The judge ruled in Mason's favor. The Hendersons were granted emergency guardianship, and Mason officially accepted the inheritance that afternoon. 300 acres of protected farmland, the house, Samuel's seed collection, and a trust fund for college. But that evening, James Thornton showed up at the Henderson farm. Mason watched him approach from the porch, his stomach in knots. Mr. Henderson stood beside him, protective. I'm not here to fight, James said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. I'm here to. I don't know what I'm here for. An apology would be a start, Mrs. Henderson said coldly from the doorway. James flinched. I'm sorry. That doesn't cover it. But I'm sorry. He looked at Mason. Samuel was right about me. I chose money over everything. Over your mother. Over you. Over the land. And I've been miserable for 25 years because of it. Then why did you fight for the farm? Mason demanded. Because it was easier than admitting I'd made a mistake. James's voice broke. If I could take the farm from some random foster kid, I could tell myself I wasn't the villain. That Samuel was just being stubborn. But you're not random. You're my son. And Samuel gave you what I couldn't, a chance. Mason's jaw tightened. I don't need a father anymore. I know, James reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is the deed to 40 acres Samuel sold to my father in 1995. It borders your property on the east side. My father left it to me when he died. I was going to sell it to developers next month. He held it out. It's yours now. No conditions. It makes the farm whole again, the way Samuel always wanted it. Mason stared at the envelope. Why? Because I can't give you a childhood, but maybe I can give you a future. James's voice cracked. And maybe, if you ever want to know where you came from, I'll answer any question you have. No excuses. Mason took the envelope. His hands shook. I have one question. Anything. Did you love her? My mother? James's face crumpled. Yes. God help me, yes. And I've regretted walking away every single day since. Mason nodded slowly. Samuel left me a letter. He said Thorntons protect the land. But he also said family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. He looked James in the eye. You didn't show up when it mattered. But you're here now. Does that count for anything? James whispered. I don't know yet, Mason said honestly. But Samuel believed in second chances. So maybe we start there. 6 months later, Mason stood in the middle of Samuel's, his apple orchard. Spring had turned the trees into clouds of white blossoms. The Hendersons had officially adopted him 3 months ago. His 18th birthday was next week. James came by every Saturday. Not as a father. That word still felt too big. But as someone trying to learn what it meant to be family. He helped with the planting. He listened to Mason's plans for the farm. He read every letter Samuel had written, but never sent. And slowly, something grew between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. Mrs. Henderson walked up beside Mason carrying a seedling. Samuel's lawyer found one more letter. It was supposed to be delivered on your 18th birthday, but given everything, I think you should have it now. Mason opened the envelope with dirt-stained hands. Mason, by now you know the truth. You know James is your father. You know I kept that secret because I didn't want you to hurt more than you already had. But there's something else you need to know. I didn't give you the farm because you're my grandson. I gave it to you because you're the kind of person who becomes family to people who need it. You saw me, a lonely old man at a farmer's market, and you chose to listen. You chose to care. That's what makes someone worthy of roots. The Thornton land has survived wars, depressions, droughts, and family feuds. It'll survive because you'll teach others what you taught me. That broken things can still grow. You were a foster kid who had no reason to believe in permanence. But you believed anyway. That's the real inheritance, son. Not the acres. The hope. Plant it everywhere you go. Samuel. Mason folded the letter carefully, tears blurring his vision. Behind him, James was teaching Mr. Henderson about heirloom tomatoes. Mrs. Henderson was sketching plans for a farm stand. The land stretched out green and alive and full of futures. He'd been planted here. And somehow, against every odd, he'd taken root. Family wasn't blood. It was soil. It was the people who stayed when the storms came. It was the hands that tended your growth even when you couldn't see the sun. Mason pulled out his phone and took a picture of the orchard. He'd frame it someday, proof that broken seeds could still become something beautiful. Samuel had given him more than land. He'd given him a place to belong. Mason didn't inherit a farm because of DNA. He inherited it because he saw value where others saw property. Because he asked why instead of how much. Because he understood that legacy isn't about what you own. It's about what you protect for those who come after. The Thornton farm still stands today. Mason runs it as a teaching farm now, where foster kids learn about soil and seeds and second chances. James volunteers there every weekend. And somewhere, in a frame above the fireplace, hangs that photo of Samuel and teenage James. A reminder that we're all just one choice away from becoming someone different. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when you need roots. Now it's your turn. Comment one word that describes your family. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that broken things can still grow. Subscribe to Found Family Tales for more stories of love, loss, and the families we choose. Because everyone deserves a place to belong.